Chamber pay-per-view come up in February, so it would seem a little...
No, they've changed it. It's now Fastlane.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, they've changed the title, and that's why people... They did it last year, in fact. I don't know if you can remember when we had to go through that. But I don't know. I mean, Elimination Chamber on at WrestleMania for an Intercontinental match. I mean, it's one thing to have ladder, and to be honest with you, I'm a bit sick of having back-to-back ladder matches for those guys. I think I'd like to see the Intercontinental belt maybe a little bit different, treated like, just a singles match. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we always have to have these what basically in theory, Matt, are Money in the Banks, really, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really need to see an Elimination Chamber. I think it should be something that's held back as a bit of a special moment, because for me it is an incredibly kind of brutal match, and if they book it that way, it would be much better, because I wouldn't really want to be involved in an Elimination Chamber with a steel floor. If you thought the walls were bad enough, I wouldn't want to be landing on that too many times. Yeah. So I think the Prestige would be better for a heavyweight kind of deal with that.
Yeah, you can imagine it, Vince, before the 6 guys or 8 guys go out. Damage yourselves, absolutely brutal, wouldn't it? Also, the other thing I've got to think about, Matt, is where the hell would they hang it from in a bloody stadium? I mean, surely that's not logical to be able to do, is it? That's not practical, surely, in an outside arena sort of venue.
It wouldn't really be that practical.
No.
I would say hold it back for really important kind of moments, and the ladder matches become kind of synonymous with WrestleMania now. Anyway, thanks to the likes of back when it was pioneered in 2000, Edge and Christian, Dudleys and Hardys. Since then, it's kind of been a staple in the WrestleManias. I have not heard anything anyway about that. Let's take the last 2 questions. Vincent Baker. He's got an old question here. Was Andre the Giant really any good? Also, heard Andre was a miserable git in the locker room to the boys. Is this true? And if so, why was that? Thank you, Vincent. This is a out of their question to what we normally get. But Andre the Giant, listen, I always end up on this podcast defending Andre quite a lot. I think I've done that somewhat. And he does have his critics. But I will say this much, that Andre the Giant, if you really want to see Andre the Giant at his best, it's in the 70s, not anywhere in the 80s, unfortunately. But his best work was in the 70s. And listen, he worked a typical big man style. He didn't do an awful lot in the ring. But you know why? Because he didn't have to. And if he did do too much in the ring, it would look stupid. The fact is, Andre the Giant is like Brock Lesnar is today. He was getting booked in every territory because there was only one Andre the Giant, and he went up against, all their big baby faces or their big heels, and he could work that style. He was a massive attraction type match. And to be honest with you, it disappoints me to where the Big Show's got to in WWE, because that guy could have also have had just as much of a legacy as Andre left. Matt, I don't know if you are an Andre fan or not an Andre fan, but your memories of Andre, and are you a fan of him in general, or have you seen much of his work? Well, I never really saw too much of him in the 70s, so I can't really judge from what you say his best work is, because most of the times that I've seen him would have been when he was fighting Hogan and that, and I think he was a little bit spent by then. But I didn't really know the guy personally, obviously, so I can't really criticise him too much. But from what I've heard on the documentaries and all that I've seen, all the wrestlers that speak about Andre always hold him in high regard. They always say he was a really lovely guy and that. And I mean, I've heard stories that he could drink like a fish, but everyone's going to have their drawbacks here and there, but from what I've heard, it's been mostly positive.
He was very much, very, very respected by a lot of the guys wherever he was, and I've never heard that many people say a bad word about him. Yes, you're right, he was miserable, but then
the reason he was so down, especially in the 80s, there's lots of, if you listen to shoot interviews, a lot of people will say that Andre's back by then was absolutely killing the guy. I mean, there is a picture, Matt, I don't know if you ever see it, but Andre shrunk in size. I mean, he literally, his back was so curved, his spine, that he became the same size as some of these a lot, at the time, smaller guys. So his height went down. But this was a time where they didn't have the kind of knowledge that they have today for giantism and stuff like that. The Big Show now has. It was a different time, and unfortunately, he was in so much pain. I mean, even at WrestleMania 3, he went out and he was never in his prime. He was hurting through that match. In fact, I was listening to an interview a while ago. What was Randy Savage's brother's name? What was his name? The Genius.
The Genius.
Something Buffalo Love. I can't think of his name.
Yeah, that's a good point. Somebody's saying Andy, but I don't think that's right.
Well, anyway, let's just call him the Genius, shall we? He said that. He said that he didn't really know Andre that much, but this was in a time of like the sort of late 80s, and he said Andre would always be playing cards backstage, and he said he saw him looking really sad one day because he didn't have any cards to play with, and basically the Genius decided that to really cheer him up, he would go and find him a pack of playing cards, which he did, and then from that moment on, Andre's face lit up, and he said, and I think he always called him Boss. He would always call the Genius Boss after. If he called you Boss, apparently that meant he respected you and liked you. And ever since then, he never had a problem. So he was one of those guys, probably, that you can imagine was kind of like the Undertaker. Is very, very well respected. Nobody really crossed him, and I think that was his sort of persona. But again, in WWE, he worked more for Vince Senior than he did Vince Junior, and the stuff in New York. But Matt, I think what we'll probably end up doing at some point anyway on our Wrestling Arts show, I think we'll have an Andre match on there anyway, just to see him back in the 70s. I'm sure we'll find some footage. Okay, let's take our last question, Matt. This is from David Reynolds. What we got here? This is let's see. I remember this coming in. This will put a smile on your face again. The question about Jimmy White was odd, but I did hear of another random link at one time to WWE, which was former Sky Sports commentator Andy Gray. But for my money, I would have Joe Rogan, as him, Mauro, and Corey would be the perfect trio. Your thoughts? So, Andy Gray, the old Sky Sports commentator, apparently. Well, again, and I tried to do some research on this, and I could find nothing about Andy Gray being poached by WWE at any point. But I don't know if you have, Matt. That's another random one with Jimmy White there. But I didn't hear that either.
No, it wasn't on my radar. No, it's the first I've heard of this one. No, I won't say that it's impossible, but it's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, I don't think it would go down well with this women's revolution business with having him there at the moment. But considering what happened to him in football, the idea of Joe Rogan, yeah, I've always said that Joe Rogan is the guy is so passionate about whatever he does. I don't think it matters what he does. Sometimes he's very passionate. He gets into his stuff, and if he ever become a free agent, you'd probably say to WWE, go out and get that guy, because he'll be a get. And yeah, that trio would probably that would be an amazing trio to have Mauro, Corey Graves, and Joe Rogan. No doubt about that. Matt, is there anybody else that you see out there as an announcer that would make a decent go at it in WWE? I mean, we talked about Steve Corino earlier, but anyone else out there that you know of, or in any other sport?
It's a slim talent pool, isn't it? And Joe Rogan is a good one because anyone that's seen the show knows we're a fan of his. It makes UFC enjoyable to watch. But Steve Corino coming in, if he does come in, that's great. But equally as good is Kevin Kelly as well. You know, I mean, I know it's a blast from the past, but he was always a decent worker in commentating. And I never really minded him. He's got a great knowledge of the business, and it would be a huge loss for Ring of Honor if they lost him as well. So yeah, I think he's equally as decent as Steve Corino, though.
Yeah, I like Kevin Kelly a lot. In fact, he was on the Jim Ross podcast not too long ago as well. And I didn't realise how long he'd been in WWE for. And he, at one time, was so high up in WWE, he was doing talent relations stuff before Jim Ross was. So he was he had a really big part to play in WWE in the early days. And he's very good. He was underrated for me. In WWE, the way they used him, but he's done really, really well. There's plenty of commentators all over in different sports, but the thing is, they've got to know wrestling to a degree. You can't just put somebody in there and expect the magic to work. I think I always remember the time they signed. Who was that guy? And they had him as GM, Mike. God, what was that guy? And he kept that clumsy guy, and he kept ballsing everything up. What was his name? Oh, it's going to drive me mad.
I know what you mean, actually. This has been a real name teaser day today.
Yeah, I'm sure our listeners are absolutely going mad. Like, it should be. Well, that guy, I mean, he made so many errors, unfortunately, which was really bad for him. But he come from a legit thing, and you thought, it can't, nothing can go wrong for that guy. But everything that could go wrong, did he call Jeff Harvey or something like that? Was it what he called him?
Saying that though, Booker T was a nightmare.
Oh yes, actually you're right. Yeah, I mean even wrestlers have not had their good parts, have they? So, listen, you've got to know a bit about the product. The good thing with Joe Rogan is because he does like mixed martial arts, it's kind of a given that he's going to know every wrestling move as well. So, Mike Adamle, that's who I was thinking of. Mike Adamle is the guy. There's a lot of him on the network, actually. A lot of Mickey taking. Because whatever they've done with him, Matt, he sort of messed it up, and it became a joke in the end, didn't it? Become part of his character.
Yeah.
For him.
But we seem to go through spells of terrible kind of commentators, And I think on SmackDown they're trying to work with 4 now. I mean, what does that say about the brand?
Yeah, not always good. There's some guys as well that have gone off the radar that I always thought, why didn't they give that guy a run as a colour commentator or something? There's a few people out there. That they haven't done. I mean, if you go back, I always remember I used to really not like listening to the Macho Man when he used to do it, and sometimes Piper used to, because Piper just used to be Piper sometimes, and it didn't really always work in that way. But there were other guys that did do such a tremendous job, like Jerry Lawler obviously is the one that everybody, as far as the colour commentator goes, he's one of the best transitions into it, and of course Bobby Heenan. But it's very, very few. But the good thing, the thing with all those guys is, Matt, when you have a big colour commentator like that, it's always the other guy with them that makes it. Sometimes, like you have to have. You're only as good as your partner, and that's how I feel it is with WWE. And sometimes I think those guys are just sort of slung together. There's no real chemistry sometimes, and that's a bit of a downfall to what we get now. They do chop and change with them an awful lot. But of course, Morrow is a terrific announcer. I just think with 4 of them now, it's like almost impossible to get his thoughts across and his voice across. More importantly, into the match, but. That's the way it is. Okay, Matt. Well, we're at the end of this podcast, and it's been a pretty lengthy one. We've answered a lot of questions. Hopefully, I got through most of them. For those I didn't, as always, I always get back to you, emailing you guys on my travels around at some point. And don't forget, next week we're going back to 2000, King of the Ring, and we're coming to a closure on King of the Ring. So. Stick around for that, and we do have some big plans for King of the Ring, especially over the holiday period. for everybody to get into. Matt, thank you as always for coming on this podcast. Any kind of predictions for Raw tonight? Anything you've heard that's going to be going on for listeners to hear out for?
No, I'm completely going into this Raw fresh.